Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon is possibly the best open world RPG you can buy right now. A year ago, I reviewed 20 hours of the early access build and complained about 3 things. Skill trees that went nowhere, loot that was pretty boring, and bugs that quite frankly broke the entire game. Having just re-entered Avalon for the first time since then, most of my issues have gone away. If you played this at launch and quit somewhere in the back half, the thing sitting on your storefront right now is probably not the game that you bounced off. Let's start with the combat. Somebody finally took the Skyrim skeleton and grafted some Souls muscle onto it. Stamina, dodges, telegraphed windups, portable campfires standing in for bonfires. Enemies faint, they parry, they drink health potions in the middle of a fight. So holding left click and walking forward like it's Skyrim is just going to get you killed. You spend most of Act 1 underweight and running from things, and by the time you can stand and trade blows, the game has somewhat interesting boss fights waiting. While I do not think this is the most interesting combat ever made, I do think that alongside Avowed, it's probably the most interesting in these open world Elder Scrolls style games. In my early access review, I said the skill trees had no payoff, and to a certain degree they do lack nuance and mostly just act as stat stick upgrades, but after having played through more than just Act 1, they definitely can help create interesting and complex builds. I do wish that there were a little bit more in the trees that functionally altered or created entirely new playstyles, but the DLC Sanctuary of Ceres really helped in this regard, with shrines feeding 3 separate trees where you can max all 3 and only run one at a time. A full loadout system bolted onto an already deep game. Something definitely worth mentioning is that you can use origin potions to respec whenever you want, so you never really feel trapped into a bad build and can experiment with the fun loot you find. Which brings me to my second complaint that aged so much worse. Loot in this game is absolutely magnificent, and is ultimately the reason I am willing to forgive the somewhat uninteresting skill trees. Loot really can completely change how you interact in combat and change your build entirely. Loot has a massive variety and really fun passives that pretty much always had me scrambling to my inventory to see what item I had just picked up. This is especially important in a game like this because it made me want to look through every nook, cranny, box, and cupboard to see what I could find. Somewhat related to that, Transmog landed in September as well, and as I mentioned in my previous review, the armor style in this game is absolutely second to none in this genre. The armor in this game looks ridiculously good, and I hope that the art team for this game got some fat bonuses for these sets. So now let's talk about quests, choices, and the world. Something interesting about this game is that you can kill almost anyone in this game. Faction leaders, quest givers, the person holding the next beat of the main story, and Avalon will mostly let you do it and then let you live with a questline you can really just never finish. Which puts this closer to Morrowind and New Vegas than the game everybody compares it to. Giving you this much freedom means the writing needs to be airtight to avoid losing immersion, and for the most part it does. I didn't really notice many disconnects when in dialogue, and in general I enjoyed the writing quite a bit. It had its funny moments, it had a strong plotline involving where you adventure through a plague-ridden, decaying Avalon, hundreds of years after King Arthur's death. Much like other great RPGs, Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate 3, you act as a vessel for something inside your head, which in this case is King Arthur himself. You must explore the broken world around you, recover lost relics, and decide the fate of the characters around you. All of this sits across 3 maps in the base game, 4 with the DLC, gated behind story progress and split by loading screens. In each of these maps, you can't walk 60 seconds without a cave or a camp or a question mark on the compass pulling you sideways. This is a super strong point on this game because much like Skyrim, you'll find yourself getting lost for hours on end, forgetting what it was you even intended to set out for in the first place. Act 1 and Act 2 are the strong points and each build around one town of handwritten NPCs, while Act 3 is a bit of a weaker point and spreads into smaller settlements. Act 3 definitely shipped thin. That complaint has followed the game since launch, and it's taken 2 content passes since then, and it's still the weakest stretch of the game by a very wide margin. A lot of people calling it barren are describing something they did to themselves though, because Act 3 lets you skip its own main quest arc. You can arrive, a tribal leader tells you the door to the final boss is right there, and you're welcome to walk right through it. Or you convene a moot of the 4 tribe leaders and work 10 to 15 hours of questline first. Taking the shortcut, of course, makes the act feel pretty hollow. With that being said, I wouldn't blame anyone for taking this approach because at this point, you have likely already invested 50 hours into this game. The combat has likely been way too easy for half the playtime already, and it sort of just feels like it's time to move on to something new. Which does lead into another issue I had. The game just gets way too easy, way too quickly. By the time I had reached Act 2, I was pretty much just one-shotting everything that didn't have a boss health bar, on even the hardest difficulty. I think that overall having a high power fantasy can be fun, but if you reach it too quickly in a game like I did, then it sort of just deflates the combat for the remainder of the game and turns it into a minor speed bump on my way to saving the world. Before diving into the most major update, the DLC, I do want to talk about the technical side, that I had major issues with in the beta. The crashes and bugs and frame drops all got fixed, at least for me on this current playthrough. I had 0 notable issues in my most recent playthrough, after having an actual game-breaking bug in my beta playthrough that effectively bricked my save and made me stop playing the game entirely, so I consider this to be a pretty big win. So now let's talk about the DLC quick. Sanctuary of Saris drops you into a drowned realm under Avalon following Nimue, and the deserters who broke from Arthur with new bosses, the skill shrines I have already covered, and enemies that scale to your level, so you can take it during Act 2 or save it for the very end game. The story really helps flesh out the main characters like Arthur and Merlin out a bit more, and it's easily the best looking area that they have made. If you're on the fence about the base game, just buy both together and stop thinking about it. Being able to follow up on the base game with something this good has me convinced this studio has a lot more in them, and generally I think I would consider this DLC mandatory for the game because it is probably the best part of the Fall of Avalon. Not to mention, if you're a power gamer style of player, this DLC offers some pretty top tier loot that you're definitely going to want to have. Since launch, the developers have shipped 4 free content drops, a full expansion, mod support, transmog, new game plus, challenge mode, and 2 content passes on the weakest act. The skill trees, the cutscenes, and animations are a little jank, but I'll take that trade for a world that reacts to me the way this one does. Give these people a bigger budget and a second crack at the formula, and I wholeheartedly have more faith in whatever they come up with than Elder Scrolls 6 at this point. It's a very easy recommendation if you have been waiting on Elder Scrolls 6. The main story runs about 30 hours, side content pushes you past 50, and Saris will add more on top. This game doesn't have the best combat in the world, the best build crafting, best story, or graphics, but it has a little bit of everything and a lot of heart wrapped into the best take on the Elder Scrolls formula we have quite literally not seen in almost 15 years. On price, the base game and expansion together are one of the better deals in the genre, and I heavily recommend it, especially if you can ever find it on sale. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.